My name is Adrian Odell, and I'm chair of the Norfolk Polish Heritage Group. And today is the 30th of January 2024, and I'm in Thorpe St Andrews in Norwich to talk to a very interesting gentleman who has Polish roots. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please, your name and when you were born and where you were born.
Dr. Philip Stuart Kirby, and I was born on the 1st of February 1947, so I'm heading now on Thursday to my 77th birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
And how long have you lived in Norfolk?
We moved here from Australia and we arrived in Norfolk in it was 1991, September 1991.
So you're almost old enough to and long enough here to be known as a Norfolk boy, are you?
Well, I wouldn't say so much as that, but yeah, but thank you for the compliment.
So you tell me that you have Polish roots, but I understand that you didn't really know about that for the great majority of your life.
My father, even up until his death, just before his 104th birthday, refused. He would not discuss anything about his early life. In fact, the comment he used to make was, "Old potatoes." That's all he said. If I ever asked him anything, he also said that we were Irish. He said we're Irish. Polish was no mention of that at all.
And why did you think he was reluctant to talk about that?
I don't know. I spoke to his younger brother, my Uncle Frank, probably 10-15 years ago when I was doing a lot of research on the family. And Uncle Frank had said to me, "Oh well, we knew that we were Jewish. We knew we knew about our background. We knew that our mother had gone to a Jewish school." My father made no mention of that at all. Nothing.
That's interesting. I understand he went into the military at quite a young age.
Yes, it's my understanding that his father, who was a publican in London, was quite a heavy drinker, and I don't think that they got on too well. So my father left home when he was 15 and became a boy seaman in 1927
in the Navy.
In the Royal Navy. Served on HMS Ganges, and there is a record in the National Archives of his service. And I have a copy of that.
But he then transferred, took his allegiance elsewhere. He was in the RAF, I think, in World War II.
Yes, what happened was he wanted promotion, and it turned out that he wasn't going to get this promotion in the RAF. So again, it's my understanding that his mother bought him out, and he joined the RAF before the Second World War. He served in Aden, and at the start of the Second World War, he was a flight sergeant, and then he later was a warrant officer in the Aden, I think it was called the Aden Protectorate. He also served in Biggin Hill, where he met my mother.
And what was she doing there?
She was a flight sergeant in the WAF, and I think she was something to do with catering. I think she did at one stage catering for Sir Winston Churchill, because she mentioned that. She's very, very proud of that. But she also did work on the barrage balloons. But again, she didn't really get into a lot of detail about it.
I understand that your father had some great sporting claim. What was that?
Well, my father was the Imperial Services boxing champion, welterweight. He was undefeated, and at one stage he was thinking about becoming a professional, but the Second World War came about.
So that was in the 1930s then?
Yes, it was, yes.
I understand that you travelled around the country a lot. How many different schools did you go to?
Well, my father, I went to 10 primary and secondary schools. I've been to schools in Wales. I've been to schools in Blackpool, Bognor Regis, London in particular.
Wherever he was posted.
Wherever he went, or whatever job he did, because he never really settled when he left the Royal Air Force. At one stage, he was running a cafe in Penge with my mother, which I believe was successful.
I understand that you were quite seriously ill
That's
in
right,
your in your
yes.
childhood.
Yes, my first sister, who was older than me, she died in 1946, shortly after being born, and the cafe that my parents ran. I think there were Italian immigrants above, and unbeknownst to my parents, they had TB, and I contracted TB because they were ice cream makers, and I used to go up onto the top, according to my wife, onto the top of the roof where they were packaging these ice creams, boxing things up from or whatever they were doing to sell, and I contracted it from there. So yeah, I was very ill. I was in the Evelina, Great Ormond Street for a year. And I think it was my understanding, without being too over dramatic, that they thought I was going to die because TB is called the wasting disease. So I wasn't getting any nutrients in me. I couldn't take the nutrients, the coughing and fits and so on.
Well, you survived that clearly.
I did.
What was the first work that you did when you left school?
When I left school, I worked for. I was training to be a town clerk, and so I was doing a diploma in municipal administration in Catford, London, and then I got very interested in the law, and I got a job as a litigation clerk for the British Waterways Board. But I was trained to be a solicitor, but I didn't get on well with one of the managing clerks, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, you want to go into teaching?" So we went to the pub and we had a few beers, and he persuaded me. He shanghaied me, and I applied to become a teacher, and I was successful. And I started training in 1966 at the College of St Mark and St John, Kings Road, Chelsea, which was an all-male college, the second oldest teacher training institute in the country.
So you left that in 1969,
Yes.
and what had you studied for your teaching?
I studied history and theology.
And did you manage to get work after that?
Yeah, I got it work immediately. I became a primary teacher in Surrey.
So you got various promotions following that,
Yes, I did.
But you decided in 1975 to leave teaching.
Well, again, I think my temperament is probably like my father's. We don't suffer fools gladly, and we never back down, which has probably been very costly for me. But I'd had very rapid promotion, and I was a senior teacher. I was very young, probably too young, and I decided I got very interested in learning resources, the development of learning resources in schools, and I got a job in London, and I did more qualifications there. There were a small group of 13 of us, and I trained at the South Thames College in London, and I got a job as a media resource officer in a large secondary school in Clapham. I think it was near Clapham Junction in the early 70s.
But you were commuting, I think, right,
Yes,
from Brighton.
yes. Yeah.
So you didn't like that. And
Well, the two things that happened. I'd had a house. I'd owned a house before I got married, and when I married my wife, she was already a qualified nursery nurse, but she wanted to go on to do initial teacher training, and so she trained at Brighton College, and therefore it was not practical for us to move house, because we'd sold up and we'd moved to Brighton, but I was commuting daily from Brighton to Clapham Junction, and frankly it was not practical.
So you got another job as a director of library resources?
Yes, I was, again, it was a promotion, and I got this job at a big 1760 comprehensive school near East Grinstead, and I was director of this huge library resources centre, because the school, the old grammar school and the secondary modern school had amalgamated to form this comprehensive school. So it was a very large setup. I think there were about 110, 115 staff, not including all the teaching assistants and support staff.
And then you moved towards East Anglia. I understand you were connected with the Anglian Ruskin University.
I was head of Thanet Teachers Centre, after I had left as director of library resources, and so that was more promotion. I was there for 5 years. We lived in Herne Bay, and then I went on because they were closing down the teacher centres in Kent at that stage. In fact, they did close them down. 13 of them all went, and then I was appointed as a senior lecturer with responsibility for the Essex Language and Reading Centre.
You didn't follow in your father's footsteps in terms of his boxing, but I understand you did some. You were keen on marathon running.
Yes. One of the guys, the chairman of the teacher centre that I'd been at, was a very good marathon runner. I mean, he was top class, and he persuaded myself and a couple of other colleagues to take up running. And I remember in Herne Bay, the very first day I did the running, I came down the stairs the following morning, and my legs were barely able to walk. But I did the Thanet Marathon for 2 years. I think it was 82 and 83, or 83 and 84. I can't remember. I've got the medals.
But what was and why did you decide to up sticks and move to Australia?
Well, I just was getting disgruntled. I applied for Canada and I applied for Australia. And as it turned out, the Western Australian government were looking for people. They were headhunting. They were looking for people to set up a brand new tertiary institute in Bunbury, Western Australia, for the to train up students for initial teacher training. And so I went over there, and that's exactly what I did. I set the whole that aspect up for with a focus on literacy development, children's language development, and reading, and so on. So I did that, but it was a 3-year contract.
And you lived in the wonderfully named Wagga Wagga.
Well, we moved. Big mistake, because we love Western Australia, but we moved. I got a tenured post at the Charles Sturt University Riverina, and we lived in Wagga, and I was lecturing to students, B.Ed students, and so on in initial teacher training.
But I don't think you settled very well in Wagga Wagga, and your wife in particular found it not so comfortable living there.
Beautiful houses, beautiful scenery. My wife doesn't drive, and the temperatures in Wagga, we didn't realise, we were really naive. We'd only been in Australia not very long, but the temperatures over there were phenomenal. And then one of the things that did happen, two things. One, my wife's father was becoming poorly, and she was concerned about him. And the second thing was that the children didn't settle, and then we also, to a lesser extent, there was a major bushfire in there, and people in the UK wouldn't realise that these bushfires burn on like 200-mile fronts, and they just take out everything. And so that was a worry for us, and we came back to the UK. To nothing. I started all over again. I had no job or anything.
So not just back to the UK, but to Norfolk, in fact. You came to Norwich.
I got promoted to a senior post as head of Norwich Teacher Centre in September of 1991.
And how did you find Norwich when you first visited? What did you think about Norwich?
Never been to Norwich before. We'd been very used to the countryside, and we were fortunate that I was able to buy a house with a very large garden, a third of an acre, and it was ideal because the children would go to school, and my wife had also got a job at one of the local primary schools. She in fact became responsible for the new nursery that they built at the school.
Now, it's quite a controversial name at this time of history in the UK. You then became a full-time Ofsted Inspector of Primary and Nursery Schools.
Yeah, it was something I did not want to do, but there were major changes taking not only place in Norfolk but throughout the whole of the local education authorities, and they were moving to a business model which I did not believe that Norfolk was prepared for it. And I made that explicit. I remember writing a letter to the county education officer, which I don't think went down very well. It didn't go down very well. And I said to him, I don't think you're going to make it. And so we were obliged to all of us, all the senior people, to train as Ofsted inspectors, whether or not you wanted to do it or not. And I certainly did not. I didn't believe in it, I didn't like it, and I still don't.
You had a stint working with students in Plymouth. Did you move to Plymouth?
What happened was they closed down the teacher centre. I was made redundant, and then I got a job as an advisor. There was no job there for me, but I had a very good union representative who stuck out for me, and it bought me time because I wasn't even 50 then. And so he bought me about a year and a half until I was 50, and then they made myself, and I think there were a whole tranche of us who they made redundant. I then went and became an independent Ofsted inspector. I travelled all over the country, and I thought this isn't very good. So I then I went back to my old college, which by this time had moved to Plymouth, but it was university college, and so I became a senior lecturer in it, with responsibility for the PGCEs and the BEds who were learning reading and literacy generally.
All the problems you'd had with Ofsted exacerbated your health condition, didn't it? Because I understand you had an unfortunate start to life. Tell me about that, please.
Well, I was born with, and they didn't detect it until I was, they initially detected it when I went to Australia. I was born with a narrowing aortic valve, and that later on contributed to severe paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, which means that your heart arrhythmias get completely thrown out. But commuting backwards and forwards between Plymouth and Norwich, particularly during the severe Ofsted inspections that all the initial teacher training institutes in the country were involved in, which was if you got a grade of less than good, they took the money away from the organisation, initial teacher training organisation, and gave a percentage of that money to the institutions that were deemed to be good. So it resulted in the closing down of numbers of initial teacher training institutes. So the pressure leading a team of BEd and PGCE students was severe, and the commuting just made it worse because I wasn't I left my car in Norwich and I was going backwards and forwards from Plymouth to Norwich by train, and that was an absolute killer.
And you were under a consultant, I think, at the time. What did he say to you about your health condition?
Well, my consultant, and I didn't initially listen to him, and what he did was, when I had a really bad episode once at Gatwick Airport, he called me in, and I wasn't listening, and I said to him, they're offering me all this promotion, and I could be this, that, and the other. And he said, well, you'll be the fittest corpse on the mortuary slab. He said, because your heart won't take it. He said, two things will happen to you. One, you'll either have a massive heart attack, and he said you'll be dead before you even hit the ground, or you'll end up with a major stroke. And he said it won't be a small one. He said it'll just be like a vegetable. So he said, what are you going to do? And I came back and I thought, this isn't. I tried to stick it out, but I realised that if I didn't listen to him, it would be bad. And so I resigned.
Well, you had a lot of moving around in your life, and also lots of qualifications. You have BAs, MAs, PhDs, and you've also done a lot of work writing research papers.
Yes.
And you've been published, and you've written books. Tell me about, though, your introduction to family history. You didn't know that you had Polish roots. How did that come about?
This was. I was very fortunate that I'd got to the stage in 2001 where I wasn't getting anywhere asking my father questions, and then fortunately I was put into contact by somebody who was supposed to be a very close friend of my father, but this friend was in fact a direct blood relative, and my father had never ever said that was the case. And it was the future, my father's third wife, who introduced me to this this lady. Unfortunately, is no longer alive, and she was brilliant, and she told me all about the Jewish roots and so on. I knew nothing about it.
But you read about it in a book.
Oh well, the other thing was, yes, my cousin Patrick Koppel, Pat and I, we set up a website with one of my brother-in-laws and another cousin from Luxembourg, and we were exploring our Jewish roots. And then my cousin, I say cousin, distant cousin, Pat Koppel is my fifth cousin once removed. We share the same bloodline. He came across a book written by the famous concert pianist Adelina De Lara. That's not her original name. That's the name that she adopted. But the De Lara are part of my the people that the families my people married into. And Adelina De Lara, in her book, she talks about this famous Polish Jewish family who were important in the military, the Polish military, and they lived in Krakow, in the part of Poland then under Austrian rule. This is what she writes in her book. So we thought, well, what's all this about? And then I went along to the Society of Genealogists in London. I thought, I've got to find out more about this. And as fortune would have it, there was the Hyamson family tree on the Crawcors, and it had part Hebrew and part writing the death of my 5 times great-grandfather Samuel Crawcor, born 1748, 1816, surgeon dentist, apothecary from Krakow, and it actually had that piece of information as part of his original death record. So that sort of confirmed it. And then there were other synagogue records that we came across where it had Crawcor, Krakow, had the names.
We've heard about your learning about your Jewish background, your Jewish roots, but you suddenly found out that you had a link to Norwich itself through those bloodlines. Tell me about that.
The knowledge of Norwich came about when myself and my cousins, we did a lot more research, and then I discovered a publication on itinerant dental surgeons, a book written by Christine Hillam, in which she actually mentioned and recorded of Samuel Crawcor, my 5 times great-grandfather, visiting Norwich in 1791. But of more importance, his son Barnet Crawcor, he decided to settle in Norwich, and he settled originally in Red Lion Street in 1808, and then subsequent from that he went on to settle in Magdalen Street, and he remained there until his death in 1834, and we knew nothing about that. I've written about Barnet Crawcor. He's an incredible character, and so that was my link to Norwich, completely unaware of it at all. But Barnet Crawcor is very important to Norwich, and he's on the internet. You can read all about him. That he established the Norwich synagogue in Tombland in the 1820s.
That's a really historical note of importance there. Well, in addition to that famous Samuel and Barnet Crawcor, I understand that you actually have links to some notables in the UK living today.
Yes, my family tree includes distant relatives, Nigella Lawson, Lord Keith Joseph, Peter Mandelson, the Samuels jewellers. These are all through the various marriages, distant marriages to a whole range of my lines, my Hart, my Crawcor, my Jacobs lines. And in fact, I've got my cousin, my Jacobs cousin, is the visiting rabbi at the Norwich Synagogue, and he's Rabbi Roderick Young.
And you found all this out in about 2001 without any comment from your father about that?
I found all this out over the subsequent years. The Jacobs came later, probably about 2008, 2009. But my father, no, he never made any mention of it at all.
Well, you've told us lots of information, lots of dates and names about your relatives. But the amazing thing for me is that you've told me that you've recently had problems of loss of memory. What's happened there, please?
Well, in 2020, May 2020, in the middle of the COVID, I had a stroke, and subsequent from the stroke, I've been diagnosed, and I've had various consultations and further tests and so on. It's affected my short-term memory, which is serious, because I don't always remember to turn things off. I can lose the thread of conversations. I had originally what was called jumbled words, so I would make up words or think that words sounded right when they're not, and I still have that. I can't drive because I get mixed up between left and right, and there are dangerous sides to it, because sometimes I can't quite work out if a car's coming close to me, and so it's important.
Well, can I just say that this has been a remarkable performance despite that. So I'd like to thank you very much indeed for talking to me today, and we hope to stay working with you in the future here in Norwich. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.